Thank you, Dr. Davison. Thank you so much for that lovely introduction and for giving me the chance to be with your marvelous juniors today. We couldn't fit them all in here at once, so we had to have 2 sessions, and it was lovely to get a glimpse of who your community is through who your juniors are. Kathy, thank you so much for putting this event together. I really appreciate your being here and doing that. I also want to thank my friend Carol, and former college classmate, Carol Hemeke. I've never been able to pronounce her last name. Carol Hemeke, who many of you know, has been a tireless parent volunteer here at Lambert from the beginning of Lambert's life, and for whom this event may be her last, as her second and last child is leaving for college in a few weeks. So please give Carol a warm round of applause for what she's done for Hemeke. Dr. Davison, you are such a valued leader of this community, and I really appreciate your support of my message and for encouraging other leaders to come out tonight, and I appreciate those others who have come. Read It Again bookstore is out in front selling books, and I'll be signing at the end, and I'm so grateful to this local bookstore for supporting this event, along with 2 others I've had here in my Atlanta travels over the last few days. And parents, thank you for being here. Like you, I'm a parent just trying to ensure my kids are healthy and successful. Like you, I struggle. Like you, I worry, wonder, wish. We're in this together, parents. Welcome. Normally at an event like this, we'd ask you to put away your phones, but if I may humbly say so, I'm trying to start a movement with my new book, How to Raise an Adult, to push the pendulum back in the other direction, away from raising kids to be completely dependent upon us for protection, accustomed to our constant direction, and reliant upon us for help, away from that and toward raising independent adults. And if the movement's not to be televised, then at least it can be socialized. So whip out those phones and use them. If you're on Facebook, check in at Lambert High School and head over to my books page, How to Raise an Adult, and like it too. Take a picture of yourself with the book later if you've got one and post it. If you're on Twitter, our handle is @RaiseAnAdult. Live tweet this event and tweet your takeaways after. And if you're not a social media user, okay, yeah, put away your phone and make eye contact with me. Let's face it, that's a precious resource these days, and I will cherish that too. We're here tonight to discuss my book, How to Raise an Adult, which, with its publication almost 3 months ago, has now branded me as somewhat of a parenting expert. But to be frank, I'm not so sure how I feel about that. I mean, I didn't set out to be a parenting expert. And for that matter, I'm not particularly interested in parenting. No. And now some of you are wondering, what the heck am I here for then? I thought she was going to talk about parenting. I got dragged here on this perfectly wonderful Tuesday night to hear a talk on parenting, some of you are thinking. But even at the risk of your disappointment and confusion, I'll say it again. I'm not interested in parenting per se. What I'm interested in is human beings. I believe in humans. I believe in all of us. You, me, you, way in the back, making our way in the world. I believe this not only for the sake of each individual, but for the sake of us all. I believe the world needs each of us, each one of us, to figure out who we are, what we're good at, what we love, and what we value, and then to work very hard to be the very best version of that self we can muster. From my work with countless young adults, I've learned that having the courage to be who you are, regardless of what other people say, even parents, is the path to a meaningful and rewarding life. And so, I'm interested in what gets in the way of each of us being that best self, in the obstacles. And I'm interested in doing something about it. I used to think the obstacles stemmed chiefly from otherness, outsiderness, from being on the margins, due perhaps to family background, demographics, status, circumstance. And yes, of course, those things are obstacles, sometimes tremendous obstacles to a person's chances for becoming their best self. When I was freshman dean at Stanford, I presumed that students from those backgrounds would most need a caring, thoughtful dean, someone to believe in them when their background and family narrative collided with what Stanford would ask and expect of them. And yes, some of my most favorite moments as dean were indeed spent mentoring such students. But since I was expecting that the students who would most need my help would be the other, imagine how surprised I was to discover among my more affluent students a growing number who seemed to lack the ability to make their way independently in the world, as frankly 18 to 22-year-olds used to be able to do, and just as crucially used to desire to do. And I'm deliberately being vague right now about what exactly was missing in more and more and more and more students each year, because frankly, I couldn't quite tell at first. Something was just odd, a little off. It took most of my 10 years as dean before I figured out what exactly the problem was. For starters, each year my students were more and more and more and more accomplished. They had done so much. You know what I mean? Let's be real. You know what I mean. You know exactly what I mean. The grades and more AP classes, and not just the grades and APs, but the scores, and not just the grades and the scores, but the awards and the accolades and the sports and the activities and community service and leadership and such perfection. Yes, my students were seemingly more and more accomplished each year, yet each year I noticed that more and more could tell you what they'd done, but not so much why they'd done it. They could tell you what they'd achieved, but not so much about what mattered to them. These students were far more interesting to look at on paper than to talk with in person. Was any of this stuff really their passion? Did they even know what that word meant? Or was it just something someone said they needed in order to get into the quote-unquote right college? Did they have a budding sense of self, or were they really just content to let their parents plan their life for them? I believe in humans, and seeing so many promising young adults walking a path of someone else's making, already a little burned out, kind of old before their time, perplexed me. As this was going on, each year brought more and more parents who came with their kid to college and stayed. Sometimes literally, but far more often virtually, to ask questions, select courses, activities, majors, internships, and careers, solve problems, handle conflict, defend and advocate for their student, register for classes, fill out applications, track deadlines, and call to wake their kid up. And to top it all off, my students weren't mortified when their parents did all of this. They were grateful. They communicated with a parent multiple times a day, in the dorm, in the dining halls, in the student union, going to class, going to another class, going somewhere else after class, in the lobby of the advising office, even in my office, or they tried to. Could we just call my mom, they'd say, sheepishly, with a shrug. It'd be easier if we just called her. I believe in humans, so I thought to myself, something isn't right. Is this college? Or is it middle school? Some of you remember the movie Stepford Wives. Anyone remember that movie? Okay. A 1975 feminist allegory of women who were not actually humans, but instead were robots programmed by their husbands to be the paradigmatic perfect wife. That movie, Stepford Wives, came to mind as I watched my students live their college lives, still somehow looking over to the sidelines for mom or dad's direction, protection, or intervention, as if they were children of 5 years old playing soccer and needing mom or dad to remind them in which direction to kick the ball. I began to wonder, are we raising Stepford children? Of course, closeness, affection, love, frequent communication between parent and child, that's all good. Who among us wouldn't wish for a closer relationship with our own parents? I'm a member of Gen X, the latchkey generation. So this kind of constant communication between parent and child at first seemed, adult child, I should say, between parent and adult child, at first seemed so cute to me. But when the dynamic between parent and adult child is this constant chatter about choices, possibilities, and outcomes, the should and shouldn'ts of life, the want-tos and ought-nots, the how do I do this and the let me take care of that for yous, when it came to all manner of their academic, professional, emotional, and personal lives, This intertwinedness moved, in my view, from a cute family picture to a rather disfigured portrait of a chronologically adult man or woman incapable of fending for themselves. My students were not only celebrating the joys of life with parents, which I think is quite natural and appropriate, they turned to them whenever something went even mildly wrong, a flat tire, a tiff with a roommate, less than great on an assignment, as if their first instinct was to call or text a parent, an instinct as natural as taking a breath of air and as essential. They didn't seem to know how to contend with what life would throw their way, how to sit with discomfort or indecision or opportunity and emerge with their own sense of how they might try to handle it. So intertwined with their parents, they didn't seem to know how to be their own selves. As a believer in humans, that's what made me worry for their future. And even our future as a species, I'll go so far as to say, which I know sounds sort of hysterical, that I might be concerned for our future as a species. But when you work with thousands of the so-called best and brightest, and you see in a growing number a kind of existential impotence, as I call it, and then you talk to colleagues at colleges all around the nation, not just at the elite schools, but at schools in every tier, and they're seeing this, and you realize this isn't just a San Francisco Bay Area thing or a Stanford thing, but a middle and upper middle class American thing, nationwide. And when you realize that the rates of mental health difficulties in children and adolescents and young adults are soaring, particularly in affluent communities, you get concerned, really concerned. And that concern for humans is what made me write How to Raise an Adult, a book on, well, as it turns out, parenting. What's going on with parenting? Well, I was mortified to discover the answer staring back at me in the mirror one day. Every fall at Stanford's freshman orientation, I got to give a talk to parents. The purpose of the talk was to embrace parents and empathize with this enormous transition they were experiencing and give some pretty direct advice. I'd say, trust your kid is capable of handling this. Trust the university wants to do not as little as we can get away with, but as much as we possibly can for your son or daughter. Now go home. I never actually wagged my finger at parents, but inside I was thinking, come on, folks, back off. This is college now. Go away. In 2009, the day after giving that annual speech, I came home from work, sat down for dinner, and reached over and began cutting my son's meat. He was 10 years old, and his little sister across the table was 8. And it was like all of a sudden I was being visited by Dickens's Ghost of Christmas Future or something. If you want your kid to be independent at 18, at some point you have to stop cutting their meat. I sat up straight. When do you stop cutting their meat? When do you stop looking both ways for them as they cross the street? When do you stop helping with homework? When do you let them talk to strangers? I realized I was still treating my kids like little kids. They never went anywhere alone. They did no chores. They had no responsibilities. I praised every little thing and tried to ensure the path in front of them was as smooth as possible. A day earlier, I'd been tisk-tisking my students' parents about not letting go of their college-aged sons and daughters, only to realize a day later, I was fostering tremendous dependence in my own kids with no end to that in sight. Was I in danger of being one of those parents who couldn't let go when my kids went to college? What? Who? Me? That night, I realized I'd been given the rare gift of seeing the results of thousands of upbringings and childhoods in the form of other people's grown sons and daughters. Why was childhood no longer preparing kids for independent adulthood? Why were college students and 20-somethings now referring to themselves as kids? How would my generation pass the mantle of leadership on to such adults? How am I and countless other parents getting it so wrong? Because it's not as if we're not trying. God knows we are trying so very, very hard to get it right. For some perspective, let's go back to how it all begins. In the beginning, our love is our umbilicus, our heartbeat, our body, and then it is our arms, our kiss, our breast. We bring them home to a sheltering roof, and we delight weeks later when they make their first intentional eye contact with us. We nurture early babbles into first words and applaud as they gain strength to roll over, to sit up, and to crawl. We scan the horizon of the 21st century and see an increasingly interconnected and competitive world that at times seems familiar and at times utterly not. And we gaze down at our precious little ones with a promise to do all we can to help them make their way into the long life that lies ahead. There is no amount of direction on our part that will force them to stand or walk before they are ready. So we watch, wait, clap, encourage, applaud. If you think about it, that may be the last time we actually believe in falling, in failure as the essential teacher, the builder of a human's capabilities and resilience. We see almost instantly that they are their own person, but we also want them to start where we left off, to stand on our strong shoulders, to benefit from all we know and can provide. We expose them to experiences, ideas, people, and places that we think will help them learn and grow and thrive. We want them to reach and be stretched by the kind of rigor and opportunity that will maximize their potential and their chances. We're sure we know best what it takes to succeed in today's world. Extremely high GPA and test scores in high school and admission to a tiny handful of colleges we've been made to believe are the only ones that are worthwhile. And we're quite eager to protect and direct and be there for them at every turn, whatever it takes to achieve those outcomes. We mean so well, but in communities like ours, doing whatever it takes has come to mean what I call the checklisted childhood. All of the things our kids must experience and achieve in order to gain entry to a small number of schools and a specific set of careers and achieve that definition of success. And so in furtherance of that, everything for our children is safe, selected, chosen, recommended, planned, decided, approved, improved, done, accomplished, handled, coached, figured out, fixed, arranged, solved, resolved, absolved, shaped, designed, orchestrated, and dreamed for them. Then we hover over our kids as they check off all the items on the checklist. We keep them safe and sound and fed and watered, and when we see an obstacle in their path, we try to remove it, all the while encouraging them along toward the GPA and all those APs, the higher scores, the accolades and awards, nudging, cajoling, hinting, helping, haggling, nagging, as the case may be sure they're not screwing up, not closing doors, not ruining their future, calling for help when needed in the form of tutors, coaches, handlers, extra spiffy coaches and handlers in order to improve the child in front of us. We say we just want them to be happy, but when they come home from school, all we ask about is their grades. And they see in our faces that approval, that love, that worth comes from taking more APs and getting A's. And when the work is hard, we stand ever closer, running alongside with clucking praise like a trainer at the Westminster Dog Show, coaxing them to jump ever farther and soar ever higher, arguing and contending with the rule makers when they fall or fail, forcing them back on the path, using our own strength to boost their effort. Their ears are filled with our chirps of perfect, great job, rhetorical ticks we use even when we don't really mean it. And we commend them to our friends and with stickers on the backs of our cars. And also we commend ourselves. Look what we've done. We did this amazing diorama. We wrote this beautiful essay. We earned this high GPA. We got this SAT score. We've gotten into college, right? Recognize any of that? I sure do. In communities like ours, parents have the disposable time and income to do everything for our kids. And when I finally connected the dots between that dinner with parents of Stanford freshmen and what was happening at dinner at my own house, I realized parents can't just magically stop telling kids what to do and helping them do it in college if they've been behaving that way with their high school senior. And they can't magically stop with their high school senior if they were doing it in junior year, and so on. Instead, it's the opposite. Childhood is meant to provide opportunities for them to gain more and more skills and more independence, to try and fail, to learn to do and be and think for themselves if only we'd let it. Childhood would, but we don't anymore. And I realize that this omnipresent over-involvement of parents means kids may grow to be chronologically adults, but remain rather stunted, dependent on parents to do not only the planning and the deciding of life, but the lovely, light, ethereal dreaming as well. Look, my book is called How to Raise an Adult, but it could just as easily have been called The Road to Hell. Because we planned and paved our child's perfect path with the very best of intentions. But if you look at what we've done, if you have the courage, the guts to really look at it, you see that when we've walked so closely alongside our kids, when we've told them not only what to do with their lives, but how to do it, when we do the work for them when they struggle, and even when they aren't struggling, we just overhelp to ensure they get the extra edge, when we push, when we make them study a certain thing, shape their dreams, tell them who they must be to make us proud, we've actually undermined our kids' chance to make their own way. Too many playwrights and poets are forced into STEM. A teenager commits suicide, and his obituary includes his SAT score. And you know what the worst part of this is? Besides how arrogant it is to force someone else's life path in the direction of a particular specific college or career, how unethical it is to overhelp with their homework, those dioramas, come on now. How cruel it is to be a constant crutch that will not always be there for them, and how harmful it is to make them feel that our love is conditioned on admission to a certain school. The worst part, unintended yet insidious, that results when we live right up in their heads all the time, is that they get the message in their young, developing brains. I don't think you can do this without me, kid. Trying to boost them up, we are paradoxically tearing them down. We overhelp so as not to disadvantage them, yet they're disadvantaged because we do so much. You're not good enough for this life as you are, is the message. You never will be. You can't make your own decisions. Be trusted with the task of being successful in life. You need me to direct and guide you. You will always need me, is the message. I believe in humans, and I have to tell you, we're smothering our kids. We're smothering the life, the very sense of self, out of our precious kids. Our job as parents is to put ourselves out of a job and raise our precious children to independence. We gave them life, but life is to be lived in order for them to become the beautifully unique individual they are. We have to let them be. We've succeeded as parents if our adult children can fend for themselves. And if you're wondering, fend means look after and provide for oneself without any help from others, not call your parents and have them fend for you. We're supposed to want that for them. But these days, we seem sort of sickly engaged by their need to constantly need us. A need, remember, that we manufactured. We've got to back off for our kids' sake, but also for our own. I believe in humans, and guess what? That includes us parents, too. Many of us spend our lives scheduled to the hilt between work and home, homework and homeroom, practice tests and practice fields, trying to keep up with the judgmental Joneses. Ours is an endless shuffle to a rehearsal, a practice, a tutoring session, an expert of some kind designed to make our kid better at something. We are on autopilot in our minivans, going through the motions, making the snacks, being on the committees, arguing with teachers, principals, coaches, and referees, serving as our kids' concierge, personal assistant, and secretary, fearing our spouses' expectations, vaguely wondering when we'll ever get off the sidelines of soccer practice and start living our own rich, vibrant life again. Our morning medication is caffeine. Our evening medication is wine. Long, long, long gone are the days of throwing open the back door and saying, "Get out there and play. I'll call you for dinner." There are no wide open doors or afternoons for that matter, and no one is home to play. If you're a boomer or Gen Xer, it sounds like ancient history that you remember. If you're a millennial, it sounds like fiction. No, there's no time for those things, no room. There's only the schedule and the drop-off and the pickup and some semblance of that family dinner we all know we're supposed to have, and then the homework. Until some set of us plus them is exhausted. Sleep, repeat. When I was writing How to Raise an Adult, Mom in my community pulled me aside at a meeting and pleaded, "When did childhood get so stressful?" I put my hand on her shoulder, and as tears slowly filled her eyes, another mother came over. She had overheard. She was nodding her head. And the second mother leaned in and asked me, "Do you know how many moms in our community are medicated for anxiety?" I didn't know the answer to either question, but a growing number of conversations like this, with parents like these, became another reason to write my book. I believe in humans. I believe in all of us. And I guess you could say that my role as a college dean afforded me a view of the future that frightened me. And now I'm running back to warn all of us still raising kids that this overly protective, overly directive, overly hand-holding way of parenting is harmful to kids, to parents, to us all. I'm here with this book and this rhetoric and this book tour and some kind of authority that comes from all of it. But I don't think you really needed me to say any of this to you. You know it. We all know it. We hear about 20-somethings and even 30-somethings failing to launch. We see children withering under the pressure of the checklisted childhood. We feel ourselves struggling to do all that parents do these days to ensure that that checklist is adhered to. We remember our own much freer childhoods, lived not that long ago. And we imagine a different, saner way for our own kids and ourselves, perhaps elsewhere, I don't know, Wyoming. Yet we look over our shoulder and see the galloping herd of other parents who are constantly hovering over their kids, cultivating them like precious little bonsai trees, spending more money, hiring more help, taking more time off just to ensure their kid makes the grade, makes the cut, gets admitted to that school over our kid, bragging about their outcomes. We want to trust our instincts, wish we were brave enough to walk away, focus on family time, not test prep, incite laughter, prompt joy. Let our kids just be. But we fear the herd of overparents and the short-term win their kid will achieve with all that help. Even when we know better, the overparenting herd is like a bully we feel the need to go along with, lest we be hurt by it even further. Look, we love our kids with a driving force, an aching, fierce terror joy we can barely even understand. It is the most humbling, precious, bewildering task to raise another human. 10 years ago, when I wrote my first piece on the harm of overparenting, I was just a college dean with a whole lot of compassion for young adults and a mounting concern that something was not right. 10 years later, there's abundant evidence from study after study from the field of psychology that our overprotection, overdirection, and excessive hand-holding harms kids, deprives them of life skills, renders them less than capable in the workplace, and leads to much higher rates of anxiety and depression. According to a very recent study of 100,000 college students from 153 different campuses, including all the biggest brand name campuses and about 130 others, 100,000 kids, college students, 84.3% said they were overwhelmed by all they had to do. 60.5% were very sad. 57% were very lonely. 51.3% felt overwhelming anxiety. 46.5% felt things were hopeless. That's almost half. Remember, this was from kids all over, tiers 1, 2, and 3, large universities, small colleges, east, west, north, south. It's not just those who get into and attend the most elite schools who are suffering. There's an unhealthy amount of pressure and stress in childhood itself today, everywhere. As Dr. Davison said, I got to speak to Lambert's juniors today, all of them. Had to break them into two because they're so big. I told them I'd be talking to you tonight, and I asked them what they wanted me to share with you. Here are some of the things they said. Parents, please don't care so much about every little thing. It's scary. I put pressure on myself. I don't need more from you. I have no social life, but I need one. You don't always hear us. Start believing in me and not comparing me to others. The mother in me just aches reading this. You can imagine what it was like to hear this and try to hold my composure together on the stage. We can and must do better. Look, there's a lot that's wrong in society, larger forces that both constrain and impel us as parents, like the overwhelming sense that there are only a small handful of colleges that are worth applying to. But let's not forget that despite those large societal forces and mindsets at work, that we have tremendous control at what I call the local level of our kitchen counter and our dining room table, where we've got children who needed dinner tonight and who'll need breakfast tomorrow morning. I hope you'll join me in doing right by our children, by leaving the herd of hoverers, by fostering independence, not dependence, by pulling back our blinders and looking at a greater number of colleges, and by supporting them being who they are rather than telling them who and what to be. Together, I think we can push the pendulum back in the other direction, away from overprotected, over-directed, handheld, anxiety and depression-riddled forever children, and toward raising happy, healthy, successful adults. Thank you.